Good morning. My name's Julie Towers and I'm the Managing Director of Penna. And my team and I have had the pleasure of working with all of you around the development centres carried out at the back end of last year. And I saw some of you through the early part of this new year to present back some of the findings. I'm really sorry I can't be with you in person here today, but as the team will tell you, I'm off doing an employment tribunal. I have to say I'd much rather be with you. It's not my employment tribunal, I'm supporting a client. So thank you to Peter and the team for their flexibility and allowing me through the power of video to give my presentation, and I hope create some thoughts for today and some discussions as you have this Leadership Away Day around your own development. So what we're going to cover, I'm going to just give you a quick flavour on where we are, the activity in the programme, just to remind you what we actually did and what we were setting as goals for the development centres. Why did we do that programme? Why did we ask you to give up your time and your input around development in Oxfordshire? And just give you a flavour of where the programme is at the moment. And then I'm going to share with you the full cohort map, which tells you of the leadership qualities in Oxfordshire. Where are the strengths? Where are the development areas? Where might you want to think about future strengths? And are you surprised by the outcome? Are you pleased with the outcome? Do you want to, as a directorate or as a cohort, think carefully about how you strengthen these qualities over the coming months and years? I'm going to give you some observations. We learn a lot through development centres. Obviously, we learn a lot about you as individuals, which is very private to you and in your personal development plan. But we also learn a lot about an organisation, the way it ticks, how people find these things, and what that tells us about the way in which the organisation runs itself, its culture. And Peter and the senior leadership team have been really welcoming and open to feedback. And I think these development centres, I hope, have started a good journey of feedback becoming cultural in Oxfordshire. After all, feedback is the breakfast of champions. I'm then going to give you some prompt thinking on future development. Your day today is all about development, and I know you've got new providers in the room, you've got the HR BPs around, and today is focused about how can you as an individual, how can you as a team and as a directorate and as a corporate leadership team really energise the County Council to deliver on its strategic priorities. The whole investment around this development programme has been about helping people step up, move on and progress themselves, their careers and their performance. So let's start from the beginning, the development centres. It probably seems a long time ago since last October when you were all asked to attend at the Syed Business Centre and put yourself through a fairly rigorous day. So thank you from me and on behalf of the senior leadership team for doing that willingly and with enthusiasm, and enjoying mostly the inputs and the outputs of the development centre. Not many organisations would choose to evaluate itself when it's already high performing. That often happens through intervention. But here we had in Oxfordshire a high performing organisation who said, good is not good enough, it has to be excellent. Our residents deserve the very best. And we want to make sure we're moving fast in this very challenging era of austerity. So the goal of the development centres was very clear. We wanted to identify how managers could align themselves to the Oxfordshire County Council leadership qualities. The important point, and I said to many of you during the development centres, this isn't about your technical competency. We weren't checking whether you were a great planner or a great social worker or a great clerical admin, business leader, HR person. This was all about your behaviour, the qualities that you demonstrated through your management and your leadership performance, your leadership toolkit. And the very, very important goal, well, it was about enabling clearer development. This wasn't about testing people or checking performance. This was about having a clear development plan. I think the Chief Exec, Peter, was very clear that the organisation needed to invest back in its leaders and its managers to make sure they were the very best they could be in order that they could then inspire the rest of the organisation. So we wanted to focus on L&D inputs. And I'm delighted that today you're going to be talking about some of those new offers. We also wanted to understand what the development needs were by directorate, and I'm going to share with you in a moment how the directorates slightly differed and where the strengths and different development gaps were in those directorates, so that each directorate could take that away and think about their own development. And most of all, we wanted to improve leadership behaviour. If you understand how your leadership impacts others, if you think more carefully about how your leadership impacts others, then you will improve because you are naturally inquisitive and wanting to get better. And everybody in the CLT is naturally a good leader already by their very nature of their role and doing the work, but actually to inspire performance, to motivate others to perform, we have to be at our very best. So we wanted to make sure that everybody could drive productivity and performance to deliver better outcomes, most importantly for the residents of Oxfordshire. So I really thank you for embracing the development centres, and I hope that as time's gone on, the impact of those has landed with you even more greatly. Just to let you know what's going to happen next steps, we've done a full cohort and directorate diagnostic, which I'm going to share with you today, and that's really aided the leadership planning that I know the team have been able to produce for you, and I think you're going to see more of today. And of course, you should have been having, and if you're not having, please wave, a one-to-one review with your line manager. You should be sitting and talking through that development and putting in place clear plans. And that conversation in itself is a rich one and an important one to really talk about how you're improving your leadership qualities. We always spend time, don't we, with the to-do list. Have you done? What's next? What's the next project? Let's get this moving. That's natural business as usual. To sit down with your manager and have a conversation about your performance, your development, and more importantly, your leadership impact, not just your technical output, I think is really key. And I hope those of you that have had those conversations, they've been pivotal and they've been important and will form the shape of your future one-to-ones as well. Those of you that haven't had one, talk to your line manager and make sure it happens. In June, we'll be doing a full impact audit. I will be coming to see all of the managers and auditing what's happened after the development centres. Because what we normally see happen is a range of things. People use their development plan to great output and they are promoted, they're developed, they're moving on, and we get positive reaction. Or people are still concerned about their development plan and they need to have more input into it, or perhaps don't understand what the next steps are. So it allows us to ask that question. And we get to see what's happened to the group as well. We would hope that in that time there'd been some people looking at the way in which they can develop themselves, hopefully some promotions and people progressing, or perhaps just helping people think about what their future development and career might be. So I'll be doing those audits in June with each of the managers and gathering a full impact review in each area to see what the total impact has been of the investment that Oxfordshire has made in you. So let's take a look at the total cohort overview. Now you've got these slides in front of you, I hope, because they're probably quite small to read on the screen. But just to give you a flavour of what you're seeing, and I'm going to go through this for each directorate as well. So here you've got just a spider map, just showing you very simply on the scoring board where the strengths, where the development gaps are for the total cohort, so the total 82 people that took part in the development centre, how they position themselves. Here just seeing it on a more of a colour chart, and here you've got the table. Now bear in mind the 5 was the high score. So when you see 2s and 3s, don't think that's poor. 5 was the top of the range. And you can see here that of everybody we saw from the cohort, the headline strengths for this cohort, what you're really good at, are joined up thinking and working in partnership. Now they're great strengths to see for a local authority. And you'd hope, wouldn't you, that in the time of austerity, devolution, and the challenges and changes we're all dealing with, that thinking in a joined up way, working in partnership with the strengths that we would see. So that's really great news for Oxfordshire. And I think that's evidenced by the work that you do. However, some development focuses. So areas where across the cohort, we saw less strength. That's not no strength. Some people had very high scores in this area. But when we average it out across the 82 people, when it comes to innovation and continuous improvement, then they're lower scores. Now, they're not really low, so don't get too disheartened, but they are lower than your other scores. Now, would you expect to find that? I think some of you will be saying, Julie, what does innovation mean? We had a long conversation at CLT that people see the word innovation, and to you that can be very simplistic continuous improvement. To somebody else it can be radical big ideas, that change the world. Innovation's a really difficult word, but it's interesting that on innovation and continuous improvement, the areas where we're looking for leaders to progress things, to think about how they do things differently, to think outside the box, to think about shared services, outsourced services, partnered services, there's less evidence across the group that actually this is a real core strength. Now, it's a good score. We've seen way worse than this in many local authorities, but I know Peter and the team and you will want to improve that, because that's going to get you through austerity. That's what finds the savings. That's what helps you become an excellent authority. So I think as a cohort, when you're thinking about development today, you'll want to think about what emphasis you put on those areas. Okay, so let's just do the same for each directorate. Now, it's not a competition. There'll be laughter in the room now because I've said that. It isn't a competition because you're not siloed directorates, you're a corporate entity. But it's interesting to look at the directorates because, of course, what you've got is different objectives, different professional skills, you've got different ranges of types of people, age profiles, etc. So it is quite interesting to see whether the directorates have got some different work to do or perhaps some specific focused work. So when it comes to the Communities Directorate, the headline strengths, joined up thinking, working in partnership, very strong, same as the corporate, but an elevated political acumen, which, you could draw on that and say that's because they're working in very high profile, regeneration projects, things that physically happen in the county that people get very tense about. If you're putting a road through people's gardens or planning applications, it can get very political. Maybe that's driven a higher sense of political acumen, maybe a strength in there. And the reason this is helpful to think about is maybe if that strength is in the Communities Directorate but not in another, could the Communities Directorate mentor and help other people around the group, and vice versa with strengths? But for communities, their development focus was still innovation, a higher score, the highest score of all the directorates, but actually still below the median range. So this directorate still needing to think about its innovation for the future. But hopefully you can see where the Communities Directorate is, and colleagues in the Communities Directorate can start thinking about how you might want to shape and change that. Let's take a look at the People Directorate. Now, again, some headline strengths you'd expect: joined up thinking, working in partnership, because that's where the strengths come to make the cohort up. And so it's really good that they're there. And you'd expect, wouldn't you, the People Directorate with vulnerable adults, vulnerable children, and the range of issues that it has to deal with, and obviously has to work in partnership with health, with social care. But here, the strength is delivers value. What a great strength to have. So this is a people function that actually is often under a lot of financial pressure, but it's actually really good and focused on delivering value. So the work they're doing, a high emphasis is being put on the value that's coming out of their work. So maybe that's something you'd want to share across the authority. So again, development focus in this area, continuous improvement, sort of ambition and confidence, continuous improvement, low score, innovation, about similar to other directorates, but continuous improvement just slightly lower. And again, it's quite a nuance of difference because there was quite a cluster in the average range. But what you'd hope for with your development support is for these to be moving into the fours and really showing that you've got qualities, you're working at the level of the qualities at the highest level possible as you progress through your career. So just a look at resources, again, joined up thinking, headline strengths. Some new ones here, support and challenge. This directorate were the highest in support and challenge. That might be an obvious place for finance IT to be providing support and challenge to the organisation. And you've got the working in partnership and delivers value, joined up thinking, as their top strengths. But again, innovation here. And so you can see why the corporate score was lower around innovation, because for each directorate, this was the area that people performed lower or were less able to evidence their innovation qualities. So that's the summary of the directorates, just so you can sort of quickly see how the scores average out. As I said, it's not a competition, there isn't a prize. I think what's helpful is where you've got strengths in some of the directorates, you may want to use those for mentoring or support of the other directorates as well. But it's a good set of scores. As we said to Peter and the team, it's a good set of scores. We often see in the ones and the twos quite regularly in some authorities. So you're already performing at a high level. But I know through the development plans that you're making and through the conversations that you're having, this can only get better. Just to show you how that looks when you bar chart that, support and challenge, stronger on resources, as we said, ambition and confidence, lower in resources. Might be worth thinking about what that's about if you're in the resources department. In people, we said the continuous improvement, high scores on joined up thinking generally. Working in partnership, pretty even across the board, less so in resources, probably because there is less partnership working as in classic external partnership working, but maybe we need to change our mindset about how we think about partnerships, because they can be just as active internally as externally. When it comes to delivering value, good high set of scores, really strong in people. Political acumen really stood out in communities, and interesting, less so in people. Again, that's an interesting one. If people are going to progress through their career in a local authority, they need to get strong political acumen, more exposure to members and complexity. So that may be something to check on. And as we know, we're going to leave you thinking about is innovation generally, a lower set of scores across the organisation. Higher level than some authorities, but I know Oxfordshire County Council will want to aim for higher. So let me just add to some of those observations. You all participate in the development centres really willingly. 100% of people that were invited turned up, and you'd be amazed how we don't always get that. So thank you for participating. I know Peter encouraged all of you to come and take part, and it was wonderful to see that everybody did, even though naturally some people were very concerned, very nervous. Some people hadn't been through anything like that before. So I really do genuinely thank you for participating, and I hope that the experience, the feedback, the opportunity to think about your own development in some shape or form has been helpful to you. Everybody takes to these things differently. What we spotted though in Oxfordshire, which is a great thing really, but it's worth thinking about, is you've got a high tendency to be self-critical. So what that means is you're always wanting to do better. But actually, some of you, even though you were doing reasonably well with your scores and getting good and over average scores, were still very disappointed. So you're quite self-critical, which I think is a positive thing, but it can hold you back. If you're constantly wanting to be perfect, then you may not get those innovations and ideas out. Maybe there's something about risk aversity in that, I thought. There was a mixed reaction to the psychometric feedback. Psychometrics, not everybody finds pleasurable, but actually the personality profiling is normally very accurate when it's triangulated. And some people found it hugely insightful. In fact, most people really enjoyed that part of the assessment. But then others of you were quite naturally very wary. And there's nothing wrong with that. Perfectly fine to be wary about personality profile, but it's interesting. I think there was a lot of caution over those things, because I wonder whether there was a concern that we were measuring people and the feedback was going to be given. And one of the things generally we found was that the culture of giving and receiving feedback was perhaps not as embedded as you would expect it to be or want it to be in a high-performing organisation. So the very fact we've put you through this process and you've had feedback can be quite telling if you don't naturally live in an organisation that does that regularly. So something I've discussed with Peter and the team, perhaps to think about for the future. The written exercise did raise the issue of perfectionism. There was a huge intolerance of mistakes. You're very high-performing people. You want to get things right. And that made people quite anxious under time pressure. Now, that's good, because time pressure is about putting you under those conditions to see how you react. But if perfectionism and inaccuracy holds you back, it can mean those innovations and ideas don't come out. And perhaps as teams, as individuals, as organisation, you need to think about when good enough is good enough, because that's what stimulates creativity. And maybe Oxfordshire has got into a system of wanting perfect, which will take longer. It will take more time. But that can mean you lose the ability to work under pressure and under time conditions. And in this sort of volatile world that we live in at the moment, you being able to work at pace is going to be really important. So just an interesting thing that we observed. There were some anxious individuals expressing the emotions during the events. That's perfectly fine. We do selection assessment and development assessment centres all the time here at Penna, and we're very used to people coming in very anxious because they're not used to having to perform or deliver in that way under time pressure in those conditions. And then we had a range of challenges from a few people who didn't actually want to engage but did turn up. So well done to them. And they went through the process. Yes, they probably had a few thoughts during the day about the sort of validity of it, but very few, I have to say. I said to Peter when we started this programme, we ran this development centre 3 years ago in Haringey, and of the people that were invited to come, 126 people, only half the cohort turned up, and half of that cohort turned up late and were locked out of the room because the chief exec said if they couldn't be bothered to come on time, they weren't going to be allowed in. You have a very high degree of professionalism in Oxfordshire, and everybody came along. Not everybody fully enjoyed it, but you all endured it and got through to the end of the day. So I thank you for that. So a few challenges. We asked you about the development centres, and you were very kind in giving us honest feedback. Good news is that 73% of you said it was a worthwhile use of time, 73% a positive experience, and 63% said you would recommend to colleagues, which is great. So you'd actually say to somebody, go and put yourself through that. It's been a really valuable experience. And 56.5% of you said it was a chance to demonstrate my skills and abilities. A couple of feedback points we're going to really take on board for the future is that many of you said really wanted my report to read before my feedback. I think you like to absorb information rather than have it verbally given, and sometimes we don't always issue the reports because it can be quite daunting to receive that written report and not have a qualified coach or feedback person in the room with you. But what we're going to do is we're going to ask people what they prefer and just put in place some support for them over the phone, but always through with a face-to-face feedback. Some of you said that the timing of the report and the feedback, they wanted it to be closer. So a lot of you were very keen to get your feedback and do that sort of within a week or 2 weeks of the centre. So I think we're going to think carefully about logistics next time in terms of how we can do that. And a really good point raised by a lot of you, and I hope this is something you take on board, is that in the spirit of opening up to feedback, a lot of you raised the question about 360. So this is, some of you said it's great to have feedback from Penna and the assessments, and obviously from your line manager through the development conversation, but what about my reports? What about my peers? What about my partners? So I know some of you will have done that before, and I know that's something you'll be discussing today. But 360 says to me that this organisation and you as individuals and leaders are really keen to use feedback and let it be a part of driving your performance. That's great to see. So what we'll be doing next week after today's session is sending you an update survey, which will focus more on the follow-up and to see how the development reports and the plans are making an impact or not. Please be honest in your feedback and tell us how you feel we can improve the development reporting, or more importantly, what you're learning or what you think could be offered in learning and development for the future. And I know you're going to spend some time doing that today as well. So that's been a really quick run through the feedback. I hope it's stimulated some thoughts and reflections already. You've got a full day of development conversation. You've got your new provider in the room as well, so I know you're going to have a great day. Do take some time to reflect and discuss the content of the slides, and please challenge back. Please give me your feedback through Julia or Steve, and I look forward to hearing your feedback on the survey. But take some time to reflect and discuss today. As I always say, talking is development, and sharing and hearing other people's ideas and thoughts and challenges will help you as a leader develop as well. So good luck and have a great day.